Hi there, my name is Memo, this is my channel Houseplant Goodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion, which you might be able to see around me and in front of me. I generally talk about tropical houseplants and how to care for them. Today's video is going to be slightly different. I'm not going to talk exclusively about the plant that you're seeing in front of me, which for the eagle-eyed amongst you, this is the Caladium Spring Fling, which has the kind of pinkish see-through-y type of leaves, and is also refusing to go into hibernation for winter, or essentially it's refusing to die down for winter to get placed into a bulb and stored until the next spring. So I'm just letting it do its thing for now. What I want to talk about today is lighting generally for your houseplants, and I'm going to use the Caladium as a bit of an example for some of the things I want to show. This will apply to both artificial lighting, and this will also apply to natural lighting, so the lighting that you'll get from windows and things like that. So let's talk about natural lighting first. So for instance, with this Caladium, you'll see that a lot of the leaves are pointing upwards, and the reason for that is because the light is coming from top down. And you will see this with a lot of your plants. If you've got something like a conservatory, or if you've got something like a skyline, and you've got the plant underneath, kind of top-down lighting, the leaves will usually go upwards, and most of the leaves will point upwards. So for some people that want to be able to see the leaves in a bit more of a downwards motion so they can actually see the beauty of the leaves, this might not be preferable. But for me, I tend to find that if you do have something like overhead lighting, in terms of natural lighting, so if it's a conservatory roof or if it's something like a skyline, that's how most of these plants would be used to growing. If they're growing along soil level, they'd be looking, their leaves would look upwards towards the light because that's where they want to be growing. And generally you'll find that if you've got downwards light, the plant will grow much faster and much taller because obviously it's reaching towards that light. The opposite of that would happen is if you've got a window and you're putting a plant in front of a window, but there's no overhead light, you will see that plant leaning towards the window, that the leaves will go downwards so they can get as much of that light coming in from the window and being able to photosynthesize, and the plant will start leaning entirely towards the window a lot of the time, unless you remember to kind of quarter turn it every couple of weeks just to keep it in a more columnar fashion. That's how you would achieve that, essentially, if you've only got a window in front of the plant. But the reason why it's doing it is because it's trying to reach for the light, and that's why the leaves are down as well in order to photosynthesize. Obviously, if the light was coming in from above, the leaves would be more kind of horizontal, and you'd be able to get the plant be able to photosynthesize from top down. Actually, the other thing to note is if it's leaning towards a window, it's called ethylation, or it's ethylating towards the light. So that's that kind of leaning that the stem of the plant will do itself in order to get closer to that light still. So that's one thing to kind of bear in mind. If you want more upright and you do have something like overhead windows for natural lighting, do it that way. This then brings me quite nicely into artificial lighting and grow lights. With a lot of the people that have got grow lights, there's a reason why most people would put the grow light above a plant, is again to simulate that natural growing pattern that they would get if they're growing just in the ground out in the wild, because the light would be coming from above rather than from the sides, because that's where the sun is most of the time. But I know other people also will put grow lights around, and you can still do that, but then essentially you're emulating that window scenario, so you might get some ethylation of the plant, the leaves obviously going downwards so they can photosynthesize more from the sideways lights that's coming in, and you'll also get some of that ethylation, that leaning towards those lights. And it kind of makes sense. Again, it's leaning towards a light, and if it's above, it's not leaning, it's growing towards the light. So it's a very similar concept. But it's a challenge for a lot of people when you're thinking about when you get a plant, and some of them would say bright indirect or medium light or low light situation. But let's bust a myth quite quickly now. A lot of plants where it says it will tolerate low light, and I'm thinking of the snake plants, the Sansevieria. I think it's since been reclassified into Dracaena. And the ZZ plant, the Zamioculca zamiifolia, they are ones that are sold as low light plants. And essentially, yes, they will survive, or essentially I think that the more apt expression that I've heard from somebody is they will die off slower, is because essentially they're not getting an awful lot of light. Those plants can do okay, but essentially that's the difference between surviving and thriving. Those plants will very rarely thrive in those true low light situations. But I do understand the need sometimes if you've got a dark corner somewhere and you want to put something to add a bit of green, and you don't want to necessarily buy a Ficus plasticus, or for other people that's just artificial flowers. There's also nothing wrong with getting artificial plants for certain areas. Some of the ones that are on the market at the moment aren't that bad. They're not as cringeworthy that they might have been in the 70s, and you're not killing a plant because it's an artificial plant. It doesn't need the light, so you can put it and still inject that brightness of green. Most plants on a minimum, I would say, in order to do okay and do slightly better than just survive, would need at least medium light. Some plants, like anthuriums, a lot of the times will do better in medium light. Another thing to bear in mind about medium light is the growth rate for most plants, even the ones that aren't really meant for medium light, but they may be meant for bright and direct light, will be slowed. You'll still get some growth, but they'll be slowed. The one thing that might be favorable for some people is, in the slightly darker medium light situations, you will get a much deeper, darker leaf color, essentially. So I think the most pronounced way that you can see this is with anthuriums. If you get it really close to light, you will get a slightly brighter green in the leaves, and if you got it in a slightly more shady, more medium light situation, you will have the darker leaves. And the reason why this happens is because when most plants are in darker situations and they can still survive and do okay in, the darker the leaf is, there's more chloroplasts, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in order to create more chlorophyll, which the chloroplasts are what makes a leaf green. And the more densely packed that chloroplast is, the more suitable it is to capture more of that light in those lower light situations. Hopefully that makes sense. So it's more densely green in order to better photosynthesize in a lower light situation. And that's why you'll get the darker leaves rather than the brighter leaves. But again, it's a personal preference to you on how you want to grow your plant and what aesthetic you want that plant to have. Most plants will do better. I think nearly all houseplants, and I will say nearly all, there are obviously some exceptions, will do their best in bright indirect light. And there's a lot of people that talk about bright indirect light and what that means. And it can mean several different things. I do encourage you to do some of your own research and see what works for you. But a couple of tools that I will use is things like a light meter, which you can download on most phones, either Android or iOS. And you can use your phone to just get a better gauge of the light that is available in the location that the plant is. And obviously try to remember to angle your phone in the direction of where that plant will be getting the light in order to get that level of light that's coming through. And judge it from there, essentially. And the best thing that I will tell you is start seeing, so say if you've got a philodendron and it's in an area that you think is bright and direct light and it's doing well, take a reading there and see what it's coming up on, and then try moving other plants in similar locations that have a similar reading, and that will be your bright and direct in your conditions. So that's one thing to remember. The other thing is obviously when you're talking about bright light, it literally just means in most households situations would be, tends to be more the cacti and the succulents. I tend to find some of my Hoyas like the bright light is a south-facing window in the northern hemisphere where I am, where it gets the brightest light, and it's right in the window, so it gets as much light for as many hours of the day as possible. And talking about hours of the day, that takes me quite nicely to the next topic I want to talk about. It's not just about the strength of the light, it's also about the volume of light. So how many hours of that light is that plant receiving? And it's a combination of the strength of the light and the volume of the light that will give you that Goldilocks region of what will work for your plant. So I'll give you a specific example for this. If something is, and I think the best solution, the best example I can give you this is something like an artificial grow light, an LED grow light, where you control how many hours the light will be on. You can give it bright indirect light because of the position of where the lights are and what your, again, you can use your light meter reading app to see what light level that plant is getting from that artificial grow light. But say, for instance, you're giving it that bright indirect light level for 4 hours of the day. It's not the same as a plant that's getting that exact same light level for 12 hours of the day, or 16 hours of the day, or 14 hours of the day. That's something to bear in mind. And that's why you see sometimes plants in the winter months will slow down their growth rate. It's because of the light that's available to them, not just in terms of the light level, but the volume of light. So if you think about it, in the winter, the amount of light in the sky is reduced to what it used to be in the summer. And I'll use the UK as an example. Like in the summer, around 4:30 or 5, you'll start getting light coming through and the plants will start receiving that light, and that light will be with them until usually 9 or 10 p.m. that evening. So there's a lot of hours of light that plant could be receiving. Conversely, if you look at the winter time, where things are darker for a lot longer, they might only be getting light between 7 or 8 a.m. until maybe 4 p.m. So there's a lot less light that's hitting those plants. So having that balance of, if you want to keep getting decent growth, especially if you're using things like artificial lighting and grow lights in the winter, remember volume of light. So don't just say, okay, I want to supplement for the hours of light that this plant isn't receiving from natural daylight. You can do that, but I find that's not always as efficient. At least that's been in my experience. If I'm going to have artificial lighting on a plant, I'm going to give it the amount of hours that it needs in terms of artificial lighting, because then I know that it's consistently getting, words are hard, consistently getting that light level for the kind of optimum amount of time. And I'll give you an indication. So for instance, these are some relatively cheap grow lights that I've got recently. There is a link to these down in the description below. There are a whole bunch of different grow lights, and I'm not saying that these are the best by any stretch of the imagination. These are my weakest grow lights, but they are cheap and I use them for propagators, and it's easier for me to kind of show you what I mean by this. So for instance, with a lot of these ones, so for instance, this one will come, it's already got a timer on it. It's also got a light level adjustment, and you've also got the on-off button basically. So if I switch these on, and you might be able to see if I turn it around, so that is, let me see what level we're at. So that is the lowest level of light, and you can see if I shine it down on a plant, you'll see what that means. Then it goes to the next one up and it gets a bit more light, and then the next one up there as well, and you get a bit more light, and then the brightest one that you can get. And you can see there how much is being shown on that leaf. But the difference is, look at the difference that happens in terms of the light levels. The moment that I start moving it up, you can instantly see that there's a lot less light that's reaching that plant, even at the highest level. So with something like a grow light, positioning is key. There's a lot of websites out there. I'm not going to bore you to death with kind of what the right distance might be for your plant, but bear that in mind when you're placing something like a grow light, is you want to make sure that the plant is getting the right volume of light. Now, a lot of the times, and I'll put this down, a lot of the times what you'll find is that when it comes to the volume of light and the kind of level of light that where you want to place your artificial light, is going to be reliant on the plants that you have underneath it. And I say plants because most people will probably not just have the one underneath the grow light. It might be several plants. Generally, my suggestion would be start the plants all at around the same, try to put the same plants in terms of height on the shelf where you'll have the grow light. If you can, and you're doing this from the beginning, this will help you. try to get plants that have similar growth rates. Don't get something that grows very slowly and something that grows very fast, because what will happen is if you've got the lights up here, this one's the plant that's growing really fast will hit that light a lot faster, which means you're going to have to then move it higher up so you don't scorch the plant, because again, too much light is also a bad thing. It can scorch the leaves. But then this other plant here that's growing really slowly isn't going to reach that same level for another few months. And then you move that light up, that plant is then getting even less light. So bear that in mind. See if you can, as a bit of a top tip, put plants that have similar growth speeds and then all at the same level, so you can kind of move that light up at the same time as all these plants are growing. That might not always be the case, but you could always get a different grow light for the other plants that might be there. But what you don't want to end up having is one shelf with 6 different lights pointing at different plants that are growing at different rates. Something to consider when you're going to be starting on the artificial grow light, because I know we're coming into that colder, darker time of the year where people will start using their grow lights again a bit more. The other thing that you might have noticed when I was showing you my artificial light is that one just looked like a yellow light like you would get from a regular light bulb. You can get the pinky purpley ones. I've only ever bought one and it was a very similar one to this one. Whether or not there's any difference in terms of the growth pattern, I don't know. But the whiter ones tend to be the full spectrum, and it will give the plant the full spectrum of light that it would get if it was outside, rather than the purpley blue one will give it the red wavelengths and the blue wavelengths, because essentially the concept there is it doesn't absorb any of the green light, because that's why the leaves are green. It will absorb the red and the blue wavelengths, so giving it that would give it the most optimum growing lights. There's a lot of debate about whether or not that's accurate or not. A lot of people have had good success with the full spectrum light because it simulates everything that they would get, and I think some people are saying that with full spectrum light you're giving the plant all the different wavelengths including the green, and they grow better. I would echo that, at least in my kind of experience so far, and I'm not a scientist, but in my experience that's been similar. And also aesthetically, that purpley bluey light, it's not particularly nice to have around. You think it might not be an issue. I'm just like, oh, it's all right. I don't understand why people were whinging about this all the time. I got it in my house and I had it on for a couple of hours and I'm just like, this is getting old fast. So you get to decide what you want to use with that. I think I'm going to start wrapping this up now. It's already quite a long video. It's probably one of my longest videos on here. I can keep talking and I can go into more details about the specifics of this. If you would be interested, to drop me a comment down below and I could almost do a part 2 of this video and go into more depths on some of the more specific topics that you might want. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.